I hate being a babysitter. I never asked to be one, nor have I ever shown any interest in it. Well, that's the consequence you pay when you have parents who constantly travel for work. We live in Southern California, but they often leave the state. I'm a 16-year-old girl, and my little brother is 4. Don't get me wrong, I love him to death, but I'd be lying if I said I'd rather babysit him than hang out with my friends on the weekend. My parents would be gone on both Friday and Saturday, so I was responsible for watching my brother and staying home all weekend with him. I was laying in my bed on Friday night, smothering my ears into the pillow. My brother was throwing a huge fit because he was refusing to go to bed. Being the big sister, I'm often scolded by my brother for enforcing my parents' rules. I was beyond fed up and just wanted to sleep. After what felt like 10 hours, my brother finally stopped screaming in his room. I let out a sigh of relief as I pulled my blanket up and promptly passed out. I fell into a deep sleep out of pure exhaustion until I was jolted awake in the middle of the night by a loud scream. I instantly shot up out of bed, assuming that my brother was having a nightmare or somehow hurt himself. I tiptoed down the hall to his room, where the door was shut. As quietly as I could, I opened it and peered inside. His alarm clock was super bright, which acted as a nightlight, so I was able to see him pretty clearly. He was sound asleep in his bed. I haven't heard the scream since I woke up, so I started thinking that maybe it was in my dream. I made my way back into my room and closed my eyes, hoping that I'd be able to fall back asleep. That was when I heard it again, this time much more clearly. Someone was screaming outside. My heart started pounding and the adrenaline started hitting me. It sounded like it was very close to the house. I flew out of bed, this time much quicker, and looked out my window. Our neighborhood doesn't have streetlights, so it's usually pitch black when you look outside at night. However, I noticed that the front porch light was on. I completely froze. Our front porch light runs on a motion sensor, so there's absolutely no reason it should be on, especially in the middle of the night. I was freaking out, so I grabbed my phone before walking down the stairs to see on the first floor window if someone was there. As soon as I started walking down the stairs, my entire body froze. Someone was pounding on the door and screaming at the top of their lungs. I made my way down the rest of the stairs and peered through the front window. There was a woman wearing a torn-up sweater standing on the porch. She continued screaming and pounding on the door, causing the tables and the front walls of the house to violently shake. I had a terrible feeling that she was in trouble, but didn't know why she'd be banging on our house at 2 a.m. She didn't look familiar, and I have a pretty good idea of what most of the people look like in the neighborhood. Without even thinking, I impulsively screamed, "What do you want?" The screaming stopped for a second, until she started screaming for help and to be let in. Hearing that made me even more sick to my stomach. What if someone was really going after her, and I was the only person who could help? I seriously had no idea what to do, so I did what any other scared kid would do in this situation. I called my mom. She sleeps with her phone on Do Not Disturb, so if I ever needed to call her at night, I'd have to call her twice in order for the call to go through. Thankfully, she answered, definitely sounding concerned since this was something I'd never do. I didn't have to explain much, because the girl was screaming so loud that my mom easily heard it. I stumbled over my words as I whispered to her that someone was at the door screaming for help. She woke up my father, who immediately took the phone and told me not to answer it. He told me to hang up and call the police. That's exactly what I did. The female dispatcher answered the phone, and I explained everything that was going on. Just like my father, she instructed me to not open the door no matter what. While we were on the phone, I saw my brother standing at the top of the stairs, who was also screaming and crying now. There was too much going on at once, and I lost all of my composure. I now know that I shouldn't have done this, but I told the dispatcher I had to go. I hung up and called my parents back. Just like the mysterious woman outside and my brother, I was crying now too. I needed my parents' comfort, and although they couldn't do anything, I felt safer talking to them. I gave the phone to my brother, and my mom told him that everything was fine and to go back to his room. I don't know what it is, but mothers seem to have the power of comforting their children in any situation. I was still in shock from the whole thing, but I felt a little more grounded and calm. That didn't last long though, because the excessive screaming and pounding felt like it was getting louder and louder. The woman's voice sounded raspy, like she completely ruined her vocal cords from screaming. I just wanted it to stop, so I screamed back saying that the police were on their way. As soon as I said that, the screaming completely stopped. Everything felt strangely quiet and calm. I peeked out the window through the curtain to see what she was doing. What I saw still deeply disturbs me to this day. The girl wasn't alone. There was another man there. He wasn't attacking her, but was running alongside the girl towards the side of our house. My whole body was shaking as I realized that this was a complete setup. I ran to the back side of the house and made sure that every door was locked. After checking, I made my way back to the front, where I kept looking out the window, waiting for the police to arrive. Within a couple minutes, I saw the red and blue lights coming down the street. They searched the entire property and couldn't find them. Once they left, my parents were already on the way to the airport to catch the first flight back home. 2 days later, my mom and dad called me in while they were watching the news. There was a woman being interviewed who almost had an identical story to mine. She explained that her and her husband were sound asleep at their house, a couple miles away from ours, when they heard a woman screaming at the front door. The husband answered and was instantly attacked by the woman and another man who popped out of the bushes. She explained how she locked herself in her room and called the police. By the time they got there, they were gone, but had stolen several expensive things from their house. Her husband was ultimately okay in the end, after being taken to the hospital for blunt force trauma injuries. He told the police that they were each armed with pistols. The woman was horrified from the event and warned everyone not to answer the door if they encountered that situation. It sickens me to think that I was a couple feet away from two psychopaths with guns. I can't even imagine what would have happened to me or my brother if I had opened the door. To this day, the deranged man and woman have still not been caught. I know what it feels like to be in a rough situation. A couple years ago, while I was driving home from a wedding, my car broke down on the side of the road and left me stranded by Death Valley in California. My phone had no service, and the only people who knew where I was were my friends at the wedding. They knew I'd be going home, but obviously wouldn't be checking in on me, given that I'm a fully grown man. I was down and out with my luck, until a good Samaritan pulled over and took me to the gas station. I tried offering him money, but he politely declined, and only asked me to do one thing: pay it forward. That situation led me to where I was on this day last month. I was driving home from my girlfriend's house one night, and my previous encounter with that kind man had completely slipped my mind. That was, until I approached a car pulled off on the side of the road. Mind you, this was the same road I broke down on 2 years ago, and the words, "pay it forward," reminded me of that day. Without much thought, I slowly pulled up to the side of the car and greeted a man who was standing outside with the hood open. He seemed like a nice guy, and I offered to give him a ride somewhere. He thanked me and hopped in. I mentioned how I was in a similar situation like this before, and how I had to pay it forward. He seemed strangely quiet, but nodded his head as I talked to him, while he blankly stared at the glove box of my car. He almost seemed sad, so I tried lightening him up with some conversation. I asked if he had any family, and he said no. I immediately felt awkward, realizing I probably made him even more uncomfortable. I randomly responded, "I'm sorry, neither do I," trying to sound relatable. I really have no idea why I said that. I'm an empathetic person, but in that moment, I felt a straining sense of tension between us. When I said that, it was like he snapped out of his trance. Right away, he started talking to me about his family more, and we got into a pretty deep conversation. He explained how his father killed his mother, and he was about to be homeless. In that moment, I felt really bad for him, and I tried to be as kind as possible. He soon got quiet again, but I didn't bother him. As soon as I was pulling into the gas station, he started tearing up and crying. He cried harder than anyone I've ever seen, and I immediately asked what was wrong. He didn't say a word for a few seconds, then shakily replied, "I was going to kill you and take your car." He revealed a large blade that he was carrying in his waistband and continued bawling his eyes out. I was absolutely shocked and terrified, realizing this guy was definitely unstable and just 2 feet away from me. I tried my best to not sound terrified and said something like, "It's okay, man, you don't need that." Although he confessed his plans, I still feared that he was contemplating what to do in his head. Before I could say anything else, he looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, you have to get out of the car." I don't know why I didn't listen right away and follow his command. I guess a part of me may have thought I could still talk him out of it. As soon as I tried, his mood quickly changed from sad to angry as he screamed at me and pointed the blade right against my stomach. That was the final straw for me. I got out of the car in the gas station parking lot and watched as he climbed over the passenger seat to the driver's seat, then sped off. I was shocked. The whole situation felt so surreal. Well, shortly after calling the police from the gas station phone, they found my car in a lake. The guy wasn't in my car, so the police began searching the lake and the surrounding area. The guy was driving my car very sporadically, because there were huge dents on almost every side of the car. The police still haven't found him, and I really have no idea if he's dead or alive. I just hope he learned his lesson from that incident and doesn't harm anyone else in the future. I recognize that I easily could have lost my life that night, and I learned my lesson as well. I really wish I never paid it forward. This happened last year. For a little background, I'm a 30-year-old male. I'm married and I have a baby daughter. I live in a rural Northern California town. It's pretty much right in the epicenter of the gold rush. It's always seemed to have a higher share of strange recluses and sovereign citizen types. That being said, this was by far the most frightening encounter I've ever experienced as a father. Some time ago, I ended up with an extra day off, so my wife and I decided to go for a drive and check out a semi-local gun show. From time to time, I'll buy tables at them. I have friends who get tables regularly, so we went to visit since I'm always looking for obscure parts and pieces for old military weapons. We had a hell of a winter last year, so unsurprisingly, it was a cold and gloomy day. We drove about an hour and knew the promoters, so we were able to walk right in. As I was passing tables in search of some cool stuff, I was carrying my daughter with me. She was very small and ridiculously cute, so everyone wanted to look at her and ask about her. This is normal from what I've observed from parents. As a side point, one grumpy lady told me she was way too young to be here. I looked at her confused and said she's like 3 months old. She'll never remember. Back on topic, there was one man who seemed a bit more excited than most men his age, but he said that he had worked as an EMT and in an INCU for years, so I guess it seemed reasonable that he was happy to see healthy babies. He passed me a few more times, moving against the crowd. He kept commenting on how beautiful she was. As babies often do at that age, my wife soon needed to feed our daughter. We went out to the car and had blinders in the back seat so she could have privacy and keep the baby from distractions. I turned on the heater and locked the doors, then went back in to help a buddy sell during a busier point. About 10 to 15 minutes later, my phone started ringing, with my frantic wife on the other end. About 3 minutes before, I noticed that the law enforcement had gotten up and walked outside of the show. It took a minute to calm her down, but apparently the guy had followed us outside and was watching closely. My wife got the sudden feeling that makes her hair stand up when she saw a shadow standing outside her door, blocking it from opening. At that same moment, a sheriff pulled up, who had also seen us go to the car. The officer asked what was going on, and the man tried to say he was talking to my wife, who rolled down the window slightly. She told the officer she did not, and didn't want to either. The officer asked him his name, and when he turned around to run the name, he tried to scurry away. He gave the officer a fake name, which is why the other officers got up. Once he was detained, he told the officers his real name, and within 1 minute of searching it up, the man was turned around and arrested on the spot. It turned out that he had felony warrants for kidnappings. The man was waiting for the nearby cars to leave and was about to try and take my wife and infant daughter. Had that cop not been right there, who knows how it could have unfolded.